Once upon a time, in the bustling city of New York, there lived a man named Richard Halden. He was a billionaire titan of industry, whose name appeared in every business magazine. He owned skyscrapers, tech companies, and luxury brands. From the outside, his life looked perfect. Mansions, private jets, and endless parties with the world's elite. Yet behind the sharp suits and polished smile, Richard lived in a house full of silence. He had no wife, no children, and very few true friends. His parents had passed away years ago, and his empire kept him too busy to notice how lonely he had become. The more wealth he gathered, the emptier his heart felt. One gray December afternoon, Richard was leaving a meeting in Midtown. Snow was falling lightly, dusting the streets with white. His driver was waiting by the limousine when something unusual caught his eye. On the corner of the street sat a little girl, no older than 7, with messy dark hair tucked into a knit cap that was far too small for her. She clutched a worn teddy bear, its fur faded from love and time. Beside her was a cardboard sign that read, "We'll smile for a warm meal." Richard stopped in his tracks. It wasn't the words that made him pause, it was her smile. People hurried past, but Richard couldn't take his eyes off her. For reasons he couldn't explain, he walked over. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently. The little girl hugged her teddy bear tighter. "I don't have any. But it's okay. Teddy and I keep each other company." Richard felt a lump in his throat. He crouched down, leveling his eyes with hers. "What's your name?" "Lila," she said proudly, as though it were the most beautiful name in the world. "Lila," Richard repeated softly. "Have you eaten today?" She shook her head but still smiled. "I was saving my appetite for something special." Against every instinct his old self would have followed, Richard extended his hand. "Come on, let's find you something special." That evening, instead of dining in a 5-star restaurant alone, Richard sat across from Lila in a cozy diner. She devoured a plate of pancakes with strawberries, laughing when the whipped cream stuck to her nose. Richard laughed too real laughter, the kind he hadn't felt in years. Over the next few weeks, Richard couldn't get Lila out of his mind. He visited the children's shelter where she was staying, bringing books, warm clothes, and her favorite hot cocoa with marshmallows. Every time he saw her, she lit up, telling him stories about the adventures she and Teddy dreamed up. In return, she asked him about his life, not his businesses, not his wealth, but simple questions. Do you have a favorite color? Do you ever get scared? Who makes you smile when you're sad? No one had asked Richard such questions in decades. And the truth was, he didn't have answers, until Lila came along. Slowly, the cold walls around Richard's heart began to melt. He started showing up not only for Lila, but for all the children at the shelter. He funded renovations, built a playground, and arranged for teachers and mentors. But more importantly, he showed up with his time, something money couldn't buy. One snowy evening in January, Lila and Richard sat by the fireplace in his penthouse. The city lights sparkled like stars through the tall windows. Lila was coloring while Richard pretended to help, though his drawing looked more like scribbles. She looked up at him suddenly and asked, "Why are you always so sad when you're alone?" Richard froze. The question pierced deeper than she could have known. After a long pause, he admitted, "Because I thought I had everything. But really, I had nothing. No family, no one to care for me. Until I met you." Lila's small hand reached over and squeezed his. "You're not alone anymore. You have me." Tears welled in Richard's eyes as he pulled her into a hug. For the first time in years, he felt whole. Months later, after many conversations and the proper legal steps, Richard adopted Lila. The newspapers exploded with headlines. "Billionaire adopts orphan girl." But Richard didn't care about the publicity. He cared about the giggles echoing through his once empty home, the bedtime stories, the simple joy of being called Dad. Richard's life transformed completely. His business meetings were shorter, his smiles more frequent. Instead of chasing deals across the globe, he spent weekends flying kites with Lila in Central Park or baking cookies that never quite turned out right. His mansion was no longer silent. It was filled with laughter, music, and love. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the balcony, Richard whispered, "You saved me, Lila. People think I gave you a home, but the truth is, you gave me a reason to live." Lila rested her head against his chest, her teddy bear tucked under her arm, and replied, "That's what families do. They save each other." And from that day forward, the billionaire who once had everything but nothing finally discovered the greatest treasure of all, the love of a little girl who taught him how to smile again.